How's it going?
Very, very good. It's been a very exciting week on my end.
Like it's been like what, almost a week since King's Rising has been released into the world. So
Yeah.
how's that been going so far? How's it feeling now?
It's been an amazing week. I would say it's probably been the maybe one of the best weeks that I've of my life. I first of all I was so excited for everyone to read the book, after so long. And as you know, in the publishing world, there's quite a delay between finishing the book and then actually publication. So just all that time, my anticipation was rising and rising. And then um, when the book finally came out, I was just really thrilled that people are receiving it well, that people are enjoying it. So
Speaking a bit on what you were saying before,
yeah,
you didn't post King's Rising as a serial, so the writing process was very different. How did that go? How was that experience?
it was really different. I would say, first of all, this writing in serial format. So I wrote the first two books in serial format. And that was probably just, I feel really privileged to have been able to have had that experience. I think that was one of the most rewarding creative experiences that I've ever had, just to have a community kind of along with me for the journey, and like feeding their enthusiasm into the project. I learned so much, that was just a wonderful feeling of camaraderie and community that I really enjoyed. King's Rising, I wrote alone. In many ways, it was like a quite a lonely experience by comparison because it was just me and the book. And I'm such a slow writer that it was just me in the book for 18 months. That's how long it took me to write the manuscript. Um, the the upside of all of that was that I got to write a full draft, then look at the draft and deal with it as a whole rather than in chapters. When you write in serial format, no matter how well you plan, you will inevitably write yourself into some sort of weird cul-de-sac that you cannot easily get out of. And so, because King's Rising was much more demanding, like technically as a book, um, I think it's good that I got to write it all in one go. That allowed me to kind of put the work and attention into it as a whole that I needed to do.
Was it difficult to kind of like go through and go back and go, oh, I totally forgot that I did that thing and I have to try and fix it now?
In serial format, every now and again, that kind of difficulty did arise. What would more often happen would be that because I'm a compulsive planner, so I did have a plan in place. But what would most often happen would be I would be blithely going along, proceeding according to plan, and then I'd suddenly realize that for some unanticipated reason, what I'd planned just wouldn't work. But there I would be with my characters kidnapped for no reason, um, or having just created like a momentum towards something that I then realized could not happen. So there was a lot of desperate like thinking and replanning that used to happen along the way. Luckily, in King's Rising, I got to smooth all of that out. I think book threes, just in general, are probably the most difficult books of trilogies to write. That's what I learned along the way. So I feel lucky that I got to write it in one go.
I've enjoyed the journey along the way. I only got into the Captive Prince fandom like last year. And I discovered a bunch of my friends had actually read it in serial format, and I was very upset with them for not having sent it to me.
Had they really? They were like there back in the beginning. That's amazing.
Why did I not know about this? And they're like, oh, you were into something else, and we weren't. And I'm like, oh, fine, whatever. But I have to say that I haven't heard this many discussions about the length of someone's hair, like ever. And I know you've kind of said it before, and you've looked at the books and there are clues in the books, and you're probably not going to answer this, but I'm going to ask anyway because I feel like everyone will yell at me if I don't. But how long is Lauren's hair? That's
This is so funny. Um, yeah, there's so many discussions about his hair, but then on the other hand, like I don't think another character's hair is described as often as his is in the books. So I'm not quite sure if people want like a specific length, like 3.82 meters. Like what? I think that there's like a general description of his hair in the books. There's like a vibe, a vibe of his hair length. A hair vibe is there. That's enough.
Fandom kind of gets like that sometimes, like really obsessed about tiny details.
Yeah, and it's only his hair as well. People aren't really that interested in Damon's hair length, and certainly not interested in any of the other characters' hair length.
Maybe it's because Damon's so obsessed with his hair.
That's true. He
And
does
he
think
talks
about
about
it.
it a lot, so it's
Yeah.
like you're like, okay, yeah, no, we really want to know all about his hair. You're feeling it from Damon's perspective, I think. That's
Yeah.
obviously you've done that well.
That's like the readers are a bunch of Damons.
Okay, so we've got 3 short stories coming in the Captive Prince universe. What can you
Yes,
tell
that's right.
us about them?
I can so tell you very little about them at this stage. What I can say is the first short story is it's called Green, but for a season, and it focuses on Jordan Aymerich's relationship during the events of Prince's Gambit. The second one that will be released is, I suppose you could call it an epilogue of sorts to King's Rising, and it focuses the character focus there is on Damon and Laurent.
The third one's a
To
mystery.
be announced because it's still a little bit of a. I don't want to give too much away, kind of a little bit of a spoiler. Um, and they'll be ranging, all of them will be 5,000 words or above.
I actually really liked the way that the book ended, like really abruptly, and you didn't get that kind of like long-winded, I guess, journey back that a lot of fantasy novels have.
Right.
Because I think that well, I mean, I'm a huge fan fiction fan, so I think and fandom fan, so that lends itself towards like fandom, that kind of abrupt ending where you're like, anything could happen, we can do anything here. Was that on purpose or like?
It was on purpose. I like endings, and I like books that then leave the future somewhat to the reader's imagination. I think we all processed our own individual feelings after the Harry Potter epilogue. And the reason was that every reader will carry a different vision of what happens after the words at the end. And when a kind of main storyline ends like that, sometimes epilogues can feel like they intrude on the reader's space, on the reader's desires or dreams. So I didn't want to do that, and I did feel like that was the end, that last moment. So, but I know people want to see a little bit more, and maybe there is just like a little bit more to explore. So I decided that I would do that in short stories, so it didn't feel like it was necessarily part of the main canon. It was just canon adjacent, but still part of the universe.
To be fair, I would read like another like 6 books about like Damon and Laurent being happily domestic for the next 50 years. But I understand why you're not going to continue.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm tempted to write it, but I think, as I said, I think we deep down we all like endings.
So, since the book has been out there and people have read it, have you been surprised by any of the stuff that people have picked up on, or anything that people are really excited about?
A couple of things that I've been surprised about. I've been surprised and delighted at how many people have responded to Layman and Charles because I had so much fun writing them. Um, and I'm just really happy that everyone else seems to enjoy them. I I have been surprised at how much Macedon seems to have been adopted as like everyone's favorite drunk uncle. I'm enjoying the fact that people are able to kind of go back, and it seems like anyway from what people have been saying to me on social media that people are able to kind of go back to the beginning now and re-experience the books in a new way now that all the secrets are out in the open and they know all of the twists and turns. So I've been enjoying that aspect of it as well.
Especially with a character like Laurent, who obviously at the start is very unlikable, and then as the story progresses, you like learn why he is the way that he is, and you fall in love with him as Damon does, really. And then you have to go back and read it, and the first book becomes a hell of a lot more heartbreaking.
It's different for me because I held like as the writer, I knew that story all along. So what used to be almost emotionally tough for me in serial format was I'd know that I was writing a scene that deep down was heartbreaking, but that was not yet apparent to the readers. So I'd be crying into my donut, and no one else would really have quite yet realized what was going on. That was particularly the case in the scene in book one where Laurent and Nicaise say goodbye to each other. And I knew that that was goodbye forever. But that was not something that I could talk to anyone about for like another year and a half. So
Is it hard not to talk about it as you're going along?
really difficult. Especially probably I've said this before elsewhere, but when I first started to write the book, um, I had written a non-successful first draft. I wrote about like 20,000 words of a first draft that didn't work at all. And the reason that it wasn't working was I tried to make Laurent too likable in the beginning. And I remember this flash of insight that I had where I was like, oh, they have to hate him in the beginning, like really hate him. And but then when I started to serialize it and I saw everyone's reactions, I was like, oh no, they hate him. and it was really difficult for me to kind of not leap in there and say things like, he could still win you, like hang in there, like no, but don't worry. And just kind of actually I've got like all of the old reader reactions and comments still archived on my blog as like a historical document. And if you go back and read through, you can see me making a whole lot of really repressed enigmatic comments about Laurent at the beginning. So yes, sometimes it was really difficult to keep it all inside, um, but I guess I managed somehow.
And I guess the payoff's pretty good when you get to the end and everyone's like, wow, I love him.
I enjoy books where um, I enjoy books that play with biased viewpoint, and I enjoy characters that it's not necessarily that the character changes, but your perception of them changes. Um, and that was something that I'd really wanted to do in Captive Prince.
So beyond the three short stories that we're getting this year, what
Yeah.
else do we have coming next with you?
Well, my next series will be young adults, a young adult fantasy series. Unlike Captive Prince, it will have some magical elements. And it will still have, again, like Captive Prince, it will have a very diverse cast, and which is something I'm very committed to. And it will also have very, very intense character relationships. So I'm really looking forward to that series. As you all know, as you know, and everyone else knows, I'm an extremely slow writer. So um, that will that's only in the early beginning stages right now. But I guess I've learned that Captive Prince readers have the patience of God, and will hopefully wait for that book to be finished.
There's been some criticism about the lack of female characters in Captive Fringe, which
Yes.
I understand is like was a conscious choice. As you move into your next series, will you be like changing that at all, focusing on more on female characters?
Yes, absolutely. So when I wrote Captive Prince, I made the choice to make it a largely male environment. And I did that for a few reasons that are not really at all relevant to my new series. I love writing female characters, and I'm really excited to write them in this next book. The female characters that I did write in Captive Prince are some of my favorite characters. Your cast is by far, she and Nicaise are probably my favorite secondary characters in the book. And I had an absolute blast writing the Vaskian women whenever they kind of galloped into the narrative. Um, so I'm looking forward, yeah, to writing female characters in my next series. I should also say that like I'm really happy that that the lack of female characters in Captive Prince has received critical attention. Like I think that that's something that's really positive, and I feel like all books should be critiqued for their content and the choices kind of that the author makes. Whether or not I made them for reasons or not, that might not outweigh kind of like the need for representation of women in fantasy because we're still so underrepresented like in that space. So so I think that discussion is really good and really positive.
Speaking of your cast, her like character arc in this book was like pretty like big thing. Like she was like before this just basically like a symbol of betrayal for
Right.
and then she became like an actual character, and she had like a pretty amazing about face turn when you find out like what her actual motivations were. So how was like writing that kind of transformation for her, or like knowing that that's her past and like inserting that story into the narrative?
Her character arc was one of my favorites to write. I think because she was so she really mirrors Laurent in a lot of ways. Both, they in superficial ways they look similar and they have similar kind of approaches to the world. They kind of enter the world intellect first, mind first, and they repress a lot of emotions. But also because her narrative arc was similar to his, which is that she enters the book with this weight of reader perception on her that's really, really negative. And I always find I'm attracted to characters who do the right thing or act in selfless ways without any kind of without necessarily being like rewarded for it by those around them or even by the narrative. And I think that that was really the case for her. So it's not really that she had an arc. It was more just that it's not necessarily that she had a growth arc the way that Laurent has one in the books, but it's more that the readers had an arc of change of understanding about her. And that was something that I was really excited to write. I think I was also just really excited to write someone who could face down Laurent and sort of enter she can enter and beat him, well, not beat him, but certainly stand equal to him, perhaps even beat him in his own sphere. And that was something that was like really exciting for me to write. So I enjoyed her a lot.
I mean, Damon's definitely got a type there, but
Right.
was it like did you always know that like Laurent would like see through her automatically and be able to see what the truth was there?
Yeah, because there's some ways in which they're the same. And I think he recognizes that. He sort of understands what it means to kind of put on a front of strength that might mask something else. I think for Damon, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. So he's not necessarily as good at like seeing that. I mean, by the end of King's Rising, he can recognize all of those things in Laurent because Laurent has become kind of the focus of his micro detail attention. But perhaps he was not as good at recognizing them in your cast. But Laurent would.
Yeah, poor naive Damon and his like viewpoint of the world being really black and white and everyone's being honorable like him. I actually love that about him. It's great. Sometimes it frustrates me, but it's good.
I've got a friend who's just like him, and she really just believes in the best in like the people and the world around her, to the point that we'll have really divergent readings of situations. What car will cut in front of us, and I'll think that the car driver was gesticulating wildly and like maybe making a rude gesture, and she'll think that they were giving a friendly wave. So
Okay, so you've been in fandom for a while.
yeah.
What's it like being on the other side? What's it like being the powers that be?
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely amazing. It's so much fun. I really enjoyed my time in fandom. So back when I was even in my like teens, I used to write a lot of fan fiction. I mean, I was certainly like fanish about a whole lot of different like shows or books or comics. But I did feel this sense, especially as I got older, that I was using my creative energy to enlarge someone else's world. The things that I was doing in their world was like changing it and making it more similar to things that I liked or things that I wanted to express that might not have even really been there in the first place, or if they were just like slight reflections. And I suppose that was an impetus to write my own stories because I wanted to. I realized like if this is what I'm doing when I'm writing fan fiction, I'm expressing something of me. Then for me at least, isn't it better to make something that's wholly my own, and to be able to do that and then have what I've created be something that is like a focal point for other people's creative energies It's incredibly creatively inspiring. It's incredibly creatively energizing. Just makes me want to just keep writing and writing. I think I hadn't realized as a fan myself how much my spark and energy also could charge the creator, and how powerful it could be for them. I guess because I was doing it for, when I was a fan, in a way, I was just doing what I wanted. I didn't realize that the flow and effect could be so creatively positive. So that's what I'm experiencing now, and it's really wonderful.
Yes, that's a lovely way of looking at fan.
I mean, it's such a positive, generous, creative space, I think. Um, so yes, it's only delightful.
You don't read fan fiction about Captive Prince for obvious reasons. Can you say what you do read fan fiction about?
What do I read fan fiction about? So at the moment, I have to be completely honest. I haven't really read fic for quite a while, and that is because I haven't really read very much anything for a while. When I'm writing my own book, I stopped being able to read for some reason. It's too well, I haven't even pinned down the exact reason, so I won't waffle on about it. But for some reason, I cannot read easily. The space that I sort of spent the most time in was like a lot of Japanese fandoms. So I used to read like Hikaru no Go fan fiction, or anything clamp related. I used to consume by the bucketful. Or like probably a lot of like games like Final Fantasy, or some of the BioWare games, that kind of thing.
Yes, I can definitely see the influence of the Japanese fandom in Captive Prince.
Well, I lived in Japan for about 5 years, so I was very immersed in that kind of storytelling for a really long time. And I definitely have a lot of influences that come from living over there, and just consuming that kind of media. I feel like much like the creativity that comes out of fandom, actually, the creativity that comes out of Japan is very uninhibited, and it's very just allowing your unconscious to be fully expressed on the page. Those kinds of like completely uninhibited energies, I don't like so often find in the commercially published world here in the West, but it is there in the commercially published world in Japan. Or like that level of just like all inhibitions dropped. But here I find that kind of completely free play to exist online, places like online fiction or fan fiction. So I guess there's some overlap there in my mind.
But when I talk to readers and fellow fans, and I talk about talking to writers, there's one thing that everyone kind of always wants to ask, and that is about advice for young writers or new
Yeah.
writers. So, what advice do you have for young or new writers?
Here are some of the pieces of advice that I would have found probably the most useful myself, back when I was just starting out. The first piece of advice is, when you're starting out, you have a lot of work that you need to do. You have to transform yourself from someone who cannot write a book into someone that can write a book. So it more than just having to write a book, like you have to actually like you're going to find yourself going on like a journey of change, actually. And that means that you've got to identify all those parts of yourself that make you a person that cannot write a book, whether it's skill, whether it's lack of ideas, whether it's procrastination, whether it's time management, whether it's lack of resources. You have to clearly identify like each of those parts and then change them. So if you're someone that like spends like I was, wants to write but shies away from it, spends time procrastinating or surfing the web, then that you gotta fix that. You gotta find a workaround, like a tangible solution for each problem. If you're someone like I was, who because I came out of fiction, I wasn't very good at generating my own ideas. I hadn't trained my mind to think in those ways at first. Then you have to do actual tangible work to like brainstorm, to learn how to do those things, to learn how to, plot and write exposition, and do all those things that write a book. So the second thing that I would say is, and I wish someone had said this to me, is that then they're like, except for like a very few people who are off the bell curve, and I was certainly not one of them, then there'll be like a long period where you're trying to write a book and can't. And what I wish someone had said to me is that doesn't mean you can't write a book. That is the stage that everyone goes through. The fact that you're trying to write one and can't doesn't mean you're failing at writing one. It simply means you're on the road that everyone walks down. That is the exact phase, and that stage might last like a year, a couple of years, whatever it is. It's completely normal part of the process. The only reason that you won't be able to write a book at the end of that is if you give up during that phase. So everyone that I know that has persevered like through that stage has ended up with the manuscript at the end. So that is all that you need to do. Just don't let anyone stop you. Don't let you yourself stop you, and keep on writing. That's my advice.
I think I asked you this like last year when I interviewed you, but feelings always change and there's always new stuff. So, what recently has been giving you feelings? TVs, movies,
Um,
books?
so here's a couple of things that have been giving me extreme feelings recently. So one of the things that is like incredibly sparkly to me that that I always get a thrill out of is how can I put this, like female power fantasy? When female characters do something that's like just really heroic and awesome. So for example, anytime that Daenerys is like, I'm the mother of dragons and I will set you all on fire on Game of Thrones, I'm always just like, this is amazing. So the two things that have been giving me extreme feels is all the teasers for the up and coming Wonder Woman movie and her hoped for appearance in the new Batman versus Superman film. She is an icon from my childhood. I'm incredibly fanish about Wonder Woman, and I cannot wait to see her busting heads and other things in her own film. Um, and perhaps like a smaller version of that is I'm actually really enjoying, for the similar reasons, the TV show Supergirl. Um, I just love it every time that Supergirl flies around and like catches a car in her bare hands, or um, sets someone on fire with like laser powers shooting from her eyes. I think all that stuff is amazing. So that's giving me feels.
Thank you for talking to me, and thank you for writing the book, man. It was great.
Oh, thank you so much. This is really fun, and I'm so happy that you enjoyed the book.
Oh, I did. I loved it so much. There was one point when I was reading it that I actually had to put the book. I was reading it on my iPad. I had to turn my iPad off and walk outside of the house. Like I had to leave the house.
No.
I was like, nope. I can't. I was having too many feels. I was like, that's it. I have to. I stood on the on my curb for like 5 minutes, just like, okay, you can do this. You can deal with this.
Thank you.